to the Marley Bird YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make this really great free pattern by my friend Ron Strong, the Sure Thing dress. This dress is the perfect addition to your beach wardrobe. It is so great as a beachy cover-up. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I wish I had something like this on my last trip to Mexico. It would have been perfect. Well, now you can make one for yourself. This dress uses 2 or 3 balls of Red Heart's It's a Wrap yarn. This yarn is 50% cotton, 50% acrylic, and is a size 1 super fine weight yarn. You will use a US D or size 3 hook as recommended in the pattern, or the size needed to obtain gauge. So this will take you a little bit longer than a typical pattern with like worsted weight yarn and an H hook, but it is worth all of the effort. As I mentioned, this is a free pattern from redheart.com. I'll put a link to the pattern, which includes the material list, in the video description box right down there below. And while you're down there, don't forget to smash that like button, as my kids say. Once you have the pattern, why don't you join me back here and let's learn everything you need to know to make the Sure Thing dress by Ron Strong. I'm excited. The Sure Thing dress by Ron Strong is such a stunner. It is so cute. And the color changes in the dress itself are done with the yarn. You can see how it gives these really great color changes in the yarn. It is made by working 2 rectangles. So we'll make the front piece and we'll make the back piece separately. They're also made on the bias. You make this center portion going up a certain distance until that distance right there. And then you begin to work shaping so that you get this diagonal bias shape. Then you will work back and forth in half double crochets, and then you finish up with the lace section again, working on the bias up to the shoulder. It's a really fun technique, and it is a great way to really play up with the color of the yarn itself. In the half double crochet area where it's that nice solid section, you can make that longer, you can make that shorter, and it's totally up to you. It's just a fun way to use up a yarn that is a color changing yarn with these long sections of color, just like It's a Wrap, and I'm excited to show you how to do this. One of the great things about this pattern is that Red Heart did include charts. So there are charts for each section of the dress. You guys know, I absolutely love charts. I think it's a great way to be able to visually see where you're going to put stitches, where you start and where you stop, versus just using the words. The great thing about this pattern is it does have the words and the chart. So you can use both at the same time or one or the other. Totally up to you. I love having that option though to use one or the other, and I'm sure you will as well. The Sure Thing dress comes in multiple sizes, and so the directions are written with the extra small and small written outside of the parentheses, then the medium large size, the extra large 2X, and the 3X, 4X written inside the parentheses. For those of you who are new to reading patterns, this is what that means. As we take a look at the pattern, we begin at the back, and we can see that we're supposed to do a foundation double crochet, and we see 121, and then within the parentheses there's 137, 161, and 185. If you're making the smallest size, then you would do the foundation double crochet for 121. If you're making one of the other sizes, you will find the number that corresponds to the size you're making. And whenever you come across the pattern where there are parentheses like this, you will make sure you're following along with the same number that is in the same position in the parentheses as the size you're making. So for example, for the back, we will work rows 1 through 18 for the smallest size, 1 through 16 for the next size, 1 through 12 for the following size, and 1 through 10 for the following size. Does that make sense? I want to point that out because in the video here, I'm going to be using a smaller number of stitches for this stitch pattern, so that way you don't have to see me work across all of those stitches. The stitch pattern multiple for the lace used in this pattern is 8 plus 1. So I'm going to be using those numbers just so that you guys know. But because I know that there are some of you who aren't really certain about how to read a pattern, I did want to point out where the number is that you need to pay attention to. And then as you go along, whenever you come across the numbers that are in parentheses, make sure you find the number that corresponds to the size you're making. I will often suggest that you go through a pattern and use a highlighter to highlight the numbers that pertain to the size you're making. So if I were going through this pattern and I knew I was making the smallest size, I would highlight the number outside of the parenthesis. And whenever I come to a section where there's parentheses, I'll make sure I highlight the number on the outside of the parenthesis because I know those are the numbers that I'm concerned with. If I was doing one of the other numbers, I would make sure to highlight one of those numbers. Using a highlighter is a great way to make sure that you are on track and you're using the right numbers for the size you're making. You don't have to do it, but if you are going to do it, I suggest taking the time to do it right now. Once you have your pattern ready to go, let's go ahead and learn how to do the foundation double crochet. The foundation double crochet is a great technique to work both foundation chains and double crochets at the same time. You start off with a slip knot on your hook and then chain 3 chains. Now we're going to build on this first chain here that we did, so it's the 3rd chain from hook. We yarn over our hook, go into that chain, yarn over, pull up a loop and stop. This loop that we just pulled up is going to become our foundation chain. So we want to yarn over our hook and pull through just that one loop we pulled up. That loop right now that chain that we just created is now going to be the stitch we will build the next double crochet on. So I'm going to put a marker there just so that we can identify it on the next section. Now I have 3 loops on my hook. I can go ahead and finish my double crochet. So we're going to build on that chain right there, the one that I have marked. So I yarn over my hook, come over here to this marked chain. Now some people I know will go into just 1 loop there. I like to go in through 2. See how I have 2 loops on my hook? And it's just working through the chain. Yarn over, pull up a loop. That loop we just pulled up is now going to be our next chain. So we yarn over and draw through 1. I can take my marker and I can move it to the next chain. This is purely just so that you can see where we need to place that next stitch, okay? Now that I've done that, I have 3 loops on my hook, I can complete my double crochet. Yarn over, go into that chain. See how I've go through both loops or both legs of the chain, I don't know how you want to say it. Pull up 1 loop, yarn over, draw through 1. I can move my marker up. If you don't want to use a marker, you absolutely don't have to. It's purely there just to make it easy for you to find the stitch you need to go into. And then complete your double crochet. What we've done here is our initial skipped chains here count as a double crochet, and then we've created 3 more double crochets since then. And it's a foundation double crochet. So we've created our foundation chains and the double crochet at the same time. It's a really great technique to use because you get some nice elasticity at the bottom of the Sure Thing dress, which is great. So it's not going to be super tight when you make this dress. Go ahead and complete the total number of foundation double crochets you need to do for the size you're making. When you have all of the foundation double crochets completed for the size you're making, you are now ready to move on with the instructions for the next row. The instructions for the next row have us work a solid row of double crochets, and our initial chain 3 will count as a stitch. So we begin either with the chain 3 and turn or turn and chain 3, it doesn't really matter. And that means that we do not want to work into this very first space here because this chain 3 counts as that stitch. So we will put a double crochet in the next stitch. and we were going through both legs. We are not just going through the front loop or the back loop. We're going through both loops or both legs, however you like to say it. And we are just working double crochets all the way down the row. One thing I'm going to warn you about is keeping the stitches consistent in both size and tension. You want to make sure that as you become more comfortable with the stitch pattern from here on out, that you don't accidentally start making the stitches too tight. Otherwise, your fabric will become more trapezoid than square, okay? Or rectangular as it may be. We're making ours into a rectangle. And when you go down your row here of double crochets, make sure you do place a double crochet in that third chain there at the very end of the row, because that counts as a stitch. If you don't do that, you will be off count here. So those are my double crochets, and that would be row 1 for the back of my Sure Thing dress. Now I'm ready to move on to row 2, and row 2 is where we begin our lace stitch pattern. The lace stitch pattern on row 2 is actually going to get it set up, but then the stitch pattern for row 3 and 4, that's the repeat that we are going to work until we get some length on the bottom of our dress, and it will tell you exactly how many rows you're supposed to do that in the pattern. But let's go ahead and jump into row 2 to get this lace set up. Let's take a quick look at the chart here, and we can see that we've done our foundation double crochets and our row of double crochets for row 1. We are right here for row 2, and we can see that there's that circle right there, which is our chain 1. And then we have a single crochet directly into that first double crochet. Once we do that, we begin our repeat for the rest of the row. And our repeat is a chain 2, skip 3. In the fourth one, we are going to do 2 double crochets, a chain 1, and 2 double crochets. So all of those are going to go into the fourth double crochet. Then we chain 2, skip 1, 2, 3, and in the fourth one we do another single crochet. See how that set of 8 stitches right there, or let's think of it as 8 stitches that we're working along here. That is our repeat all the way down the row. Remember when I told you the stitch pattern repeat was 8 plus 1. So you would definitely need to make sure that your multiple of double crochets you have working across are these 8. And then you have that plus 1. It's that 1 single crochet right there at the end. Okay, let's go ahead and work row 2 on my little sample I have going on here. If you want to work along with me on your set of double crochets that is a larger number than mine, please go ahead and do so. Row 2 begins with a chain 1 and turn. Place a single crochet in that first stitch, chain 2, skip 3, and in that fourth stitch, we will place 2 double crochets, chain 1, and then 2 more double crochets. Chain 2, skip 3, and in the fourth one, place a single crochet. This is your repeat. You will repeat that all the way down the row. Start off with the chain 2. Make sure your chains are not too tight. Skip 3. In the fourth one, work 2 double crochets. Chain 1, and then 2 more double crochets. Chain 2, skip 3, and in your fourth one, for me, this is the end of my row, I want to make sure I place a single crochet in that third chain at the end of my row. Okay, you see that? So that is 2 stitch pattern repeats right there. Now we move on to row 3, and remember, rows 3 and 4 are your row pattern repeats. So we just did our stitch pattern repeat. Now you are going to do your row pattern repeat, and that's 3 and 4. You start off row 3 by chaining 3, and this will count as part of this stitch that we're going to create. Yarn over your hook, go into that same stitch right there, that single crochet you finished, and work a double crochet. Okay, this is a partial cluster that we've just created right there. Now I want you to chain 3, and in this chain 1 space right there at the center of this stitch, we're going to place a single crochet. Chain 3. In this single crochet, we're going to do a 3 double crochet cluster. Yarn over your hook once, go into that single crochet, yarn over, pull up a loop. Yarn over, draw through 2. Yarn over your hook, go into that same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2. Yarn over your hook, go into that same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2. We have 1, 2, 3 partially completed double crochets. And when I yarn over and pull through all 4 loops on my hook, you will see I'm left with 1 stitch right there at the top, that V. So I'm left with 1 stitch. So I've done a 3 double crochet cluster, which leaves me with 1 stitch. Now here's something really cool. When you're using a chart, one thing you will notice about a cluster stitch is the symbol itself is left with 1 line at the top of the cluster. So just like how our stitch is left with the V right there at the top, our symbol itself leaves us with 1 line. So this symbol here, it gives us the illusion of double crochets, but we can see there's just 1 line at the top. So that's a great way to know that you're dealing with a cluster stitch whenever you come across a symbol that looks like it has several different stitches going on below, but at the top it's all brought together with 1 line, or I like to call it a top hat. Just a little tip right there. That completes our stitch pattern repeat for row 3. So this chain 3 single crochet, chain 3, 3 double crochet cluster is our stitch pattern repeat for row 3. So you would continue on. So you would repeat by chaining 3. Again, be careful not to make those too tight. Go to that chain 1 space and work a single crochet. And then you would chain 3. And in the next single crochet, you would work a cluster. When you get to the end of the row, just like I am here, you're going to work a 2 double crochet cluster. So it's very similar to how we did the 3 double crochet, but this time, instead of having 3 partially completed doubles, we're just going to have 2. So when I yarn over and draw through all the loops on my hook, once again, I'm left with 1 V at the top and 1 top hat, but I have 2 double crochets at the bottom, whereas the clusters in the center of your body, you'll have 3. Does that make sense? All right, so when we move on to row 4, you start off with a chain 1 and turn. You will single crochet in the top of this 2 double crochet cluster to begin. And then we are at our repeat. So you would chain 2, come over here to this single crochet, and you will work 2 doubles, chain 1, and then 2 doubles, all into that single crochet. Chain 2, come over to the top of this 3 double crochet cluster and place a single crochet. That is your repeat, okay? Chain 2, the 2 doubles, chain 1, 2 doubles, all into that single, chain 2, and then a single into the top of that 3 double crochet cluster. You would repeat that all the way down your row until you get to the last repeat, which would be chain 2, and then you will do your 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 double crochets, chain 2, and then you would finish off the row by placing a single crochet in that the third chain of your turning chain. Okay? You see that? That's it. You now know how to do the stitch pattern repeat and the row repeat for the Sure Thing dress. Now all you need to do is continue repeating rows 3 and 4 for the number of rows indicated in the pattern for the size you're making. Okay, you already know how to do that. You've already highlighted those numbers, so we don't need to go over that. Once you have created this section of your fabric to the size it's supposed to be, we will then begin to work decreasing in the lace. It sounds a lot more complicated than it really is. Let's go ahead and take a look at the chart down here. And what we've done so far is we have followed the chart for this section. Obviously, we've only done 2 repeats, and this one shows a total of 6. But we have worked this part here. Now we're going to begin to work shaping just like so. And it's really super easy. Ron has made this so simple. What happens is on the end of row 4, you end your work down here. So when you begin this first section of your decrease in your shell pattern, you will work across the row, still working essentially what would be a row 3, right? It's the same as the row 3 stitch pattern, but you're going to end early. So you will stop working in that single crochet you place in that stitch right there, and you'll leave those stitches unworked. Pretty simple, right? Then when you begin the next row, which would essentially be a row 4 stitch pattern, you will chain over and you will start the row right here and then work down. On the following row, you would do the same thing. You'd come up and you'd come all the way down to this part right here. You would stop early, and then the following row, you'd come back and you would start your single crochet here. And as you go along, the chart shows you these are the higher numbers. So these are what the rows look like at towards the end. So that way you can see how you would finish off, where we finish off with just these 5 chains and the single crochet. It really is super simple the way he's done these decreases. We don't have to do a lot of extra work. We're actually going to stop short on all of the rows. And so that part will go together really fast. It'll go by really quickly. So let's go ahead and take a look at what you need to do as far as how do you stop short. It's really, really easy. I think once I show you once, you'll be like, oh, that's it. And that's all it is. This would represent the first row of your decrease shaping for the lace. We start off with the chain 3 and we turn our work. This is just the exact same way we start off with a row 3, okay? I yarn over my hook, I'll go into that first single crochet, yarn over, pull up a loop, and complete my double crochet. Remember, this counts as a 2 double crochet cluster. Now I will chain 3, single crochet into the top of this chain 1 space here, chain 3, work a 3 double crochet cluster into this single crochet. See how they stack on each other? It's a cluster and then a single, then a cluster and a single. So I'm going to work my 3 double crochet cluster here. So remember, I partially complete 3 of those double crochets. Chain 3, go to the next chain 1 space and single crochet. And then I would continue on doing that until I get to the end of my row like I am right here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to leave all of these stitches unworked and call that a day. I simply will chain 5, whoops, turn my work, and I'm going to come over here to where my double crochet cluster is, my 3 double crochet cluster, and start off with my single crochet. You see that? So I left all of those unworked. I stopped early, and then I do those chains all the way over to where I get my first single crochet right there. And now I will jump in to my stitch pattern, which is chain 2, and then work 2 double crochets, chain 1, and then 2 double crochets, all into the same stitch. They all stack on each other. You guys will begin to really see how those stitches work. Then I chain 2, go to that this would be the 2 double crochet cluster, and I'm going to put my single crochet in the top of that 3rd chain. Okay, so that's how you would end the row, but see how it's already starting to get some shaping there. Okay, we left those open or left those unworked, we stopped early, chained over, started here, and then we work back. Does that make sense so far? Being able to see how you would just stop short and then you just continue working over? Why don't we take a look at a larger sample that I worked up, and I've already stopped short on a variety of rows, and I'm at the very top where I finished off with my chain 5 and my single crochet. So all of my decreasing is complete for this section. This is a larger swatch that I have worked up. I have 5 repeats going on here. And you can see once I worked past my row 4 and I began working my shaping, as I came across, I stopped early. I stopped right here. And then that's where I chain 5, single crochet here, and then work my way back. On the following row, when I came back down, I stopped early. See, I stopped early over here, and now I stop early here. See how it gives me this nice slope without having to do anything extra? And then it's chain 5, single crochet there, work your row as normal all the way down, come up to the next row, work down, stop early, leaving all of this unworked, so on and so forth. And you continue on doing that until you get to the top here. And when you're left with just 1 repeat, I would chain 3, double crochet to that same stitch, chain 3, single crochet into that chain 1 space, and then chain 5 and turn, and then single crochet here at the end. So I just finish off right there the same way I started all of these ones when I turned and went back. And I get this really nice diagonal, which sets up the bias part of the short thing dress really great. I love how the decreases in the lace section look super complicated, but they are so very easy. You are simply ending the rows short, which gives us this nice diagonal line, which allows us to move on to the half double crochets that we create for what I like to think of as the body of the short thing dress. Now, this body of the dress is made up in half double crochets, and it's rather solid. It's not super solid, but it's rather solid, and it is done the length of the body. So think of where this section here ends, and we are going to do this next section. It would actually be going from this bottom portion here all the way up to what would be the shoulder. So it's going to create this nice diagonal shape up from the shoulder down to the lowest point of the lace section. When we do the bias shaping, we are not going to do any additional shaping to create it, to make it bigger or smaller, but we will be adding shaping to create the bias look. Now, what I mean by that is best explained by looking at the chart. This is the chart for the bias shaping section. It looks really simple. We know that this symbol here with the T and there's not a line on it is for a half double crochet. But we can see something right down here and right up here that looks a little bit unique. Now down here, this looks like it could be a cluster because it has that one line at the top, but it is not a line at the top and all the stitches are going into one stitch. We have a stitch getting made into this one here and a stitch getting made into this one here, but they come together at the top. So we will partially create a stitch here, partially create a stitch here, and bring it all together here at the top to create a decrease, an actual decrease, because we're taking 2 stitches and making them into one. And when we do bias shaping and we decrease at one end, then we have to work an increase at the opposite end. So just as we took 2 stitches and made them into one, at this end, we will take 1 stitch and make it into 2. So we will not change our stitch count along the way, but we will maintain that bias shaping that we want for this section of the Sure Thing dress. It's really super easy. Once you get going with this, you can make this section longer or shorter. It's totally up to you as far as how you want your dress to be. But if you want to follow along with the instructions and do the specific number of rows as indicated in the pattern, I encourage you to do that. But if you were going to make any changes in the pattern, this is a great area to do it as far as length, okay? So you want to make sure that you are adding in this area. This is the best area for the length to be added, all right? All right, so let's go ahead and see how we set up these half double crochets, and then how do we do that bias shaping. The first thing I do want you to notice is that I have changed the color of yarn for this section so you can better see the stitches, but you don't have to change your color of yarn. The yarn you're using, if you're using It's a Wrap, will do the color changes for you when they're supposed to be done, okay? It can happen in the lace section, it can happen in this section, it doesn't really matter, but that's why I'm changing colors. You won't have to do that on your yarn. We are going to place half double crochets all along this sloped edge of the piece we've just created. So what I like to do is I split my piece up in half. So I've put a marker at the halfway point from here to the end. So that way I know that if I need to have, let's just say I needed to have 121 stitches, I could do half the number of stitches from here to here and the other half from here to here, just to try and keep it as consistent as possible. If you have a better way that works for you, go ahead and do that. I just know that using markers and dividing my piece up into sections works best for me. You will begin with a chain 2, and this chain 2 does not count as a stitch now and throughout. Ron wrote that in the pattern. And I am simply just going to place half double crochets to my halfway point until I get half the number of stitches that I need. Now you will notice that that is written in the instructions for the size you're making, so make sure you're doing the number of half double crochets you need. Oop, that was a single. Do the half number of double crochets you need for the size you're making. And I'm just working down the row. I'm sometimes going into stitches, sometimes going around chains. You decide what works best for you. As long as it's even and consistent, that's what is the most important. As you come up to your halfway point, make sure that you take a minute and you count the number of stitches that you have worked up to that point. And it's also a good time to set it down to make sure everything is nice and straight and nice and not ripply and even, and it looks good. You will do half the number of stitches on this end if you did a marker like I did, and then you'll do the other half along this path. Now, as you're working along, this is a great point in the video for me to mention that your fabric you're creating will start to look like it's biasing a little bit or leaning a little bit. But when the pieces are complete, seamed together, and you wash and block everything, it evens out. There's even a note about it in the pattern. So as you're working along, if you notice that it seems a little bit sloped, but you still have the same stitch count and you're following along with the instructions, everything's going to be fine. Now, if you are off stitch count and you're missing stitches, have more stitches, then there's a little bit more concern there. But in general, this will have a little bit of a bias to it until it's all complete. So don't fret about that. All right, so I'm going to get the other half of my half double crochets done on the slope of my lace. Okay, so I'm coming up to the last couple stitches here that I need, and I did the same number of stitches as I did down here across my edge here, and so you can see here it's nice and neatly out. Now what we need to do is that bias shaping like I mentioned. And what we will do is at the end of our piece right here that is decreased down, so the edge that's like narrow, we are going to maintain decreases at this end by working half double crochet 2-togethers. And then at the opposite end where we have all of this fabric happening right here, we will continue our increases. By working a decrease at this end and an increase at this end, we maintain that bias stitch pattern. These stitches are not hard to do, so we'll go through this part quickly so that way we can move on past this section, all right? So let's go ahead and we pick up our work and we start off with a chain 2. And this chain 2 does not count as a stitch, okay? We will now double or half double crochet in that first stitch. And in the next 2 stitches, we want to do a half double crochet 2 together. So you yarn over your hook, go into that first stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over your hook, go into that next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through all 5 loops on your hook. You're left with 1 V-stitch at the top, but you have taken 2 stitches and made them into 1. You now carry on down your row until you get to the last 2 stitches. In the second to last stitch, we are going to work 2 half double crochets into that stitch. When you get down to the last 2 stitches, you want to make sure that you put 2 half double crochets in the second to last stitch, so that way you get that increase, and then 1 half double crochet in that last stitch. So what we've done here is we've worked our increase here at this edge and our decrease here at this edge, and that is going to maintain our nice bias shaping going on here. So depending on which side of the fabric you're on, you will begin the row with the half double crochet and then the decrease, or a half double crochet and the increase. So we just started with the decrease on the last row. On this row, we'll start with the increase. Let me just quickly go through that one so you can see how that works up. Go ahead and turn your work and chain 2. That chain 2 does not count as a stitch. And you will half double crochet into that first stitch, and then 2 half double crochet into the next stitch. See how we just started with our increase? And now when we get down here to the end, to the last 3 stitches, we will work our half double crochet 2 together over stitch 3 and 2, and then we'll just half double crochet in the last one. So let's go ahead and get down to that end of our work. When you get to the last 3 stitches, this is where we will do our half double crochet 2 together. Remember, you're working partial half double crochets over 2 stitches. When you get 5 loops on your hook, you yarn over, draw through all 5 loops, leaving you with 1 top of the stitch, and then you will half double crochet in the very last stitch. So once again, we have our shaping worked here and our shaping worked here, and we're getting this nice bias look. You repeat these last 2 rows until your dress measures the distance listed in the pattern. Now, if you want to make your dress shorter or longer, this is the area that you would want to do that in. Simply add some inches or take away some inches. It's totally up to you. Just make sure you make notes so that way you can make the front of the dress the same measurement as the back of the dress. When you have reached the measurement you desire, please finish after a row 3. Row 4 is where we will begin the lace section, which is the shaping for the top half of the dress. So that wraps up this first video for the Sure Thing dress. After you have completed the bias shaping with the half double crochets, join me for video 2 to learn how to do the shaping in the lace for the other parts of the dress, how to do the finishing at the top edging, and how to seam it up. I hope you've enjoyed the video so far and you have found the instructions less daunting than you might have at the start. We will wrap this up in video 2. I'm Marley Bird, proud spokesperson for Red Heart Yarns, and I will talk to you soon. Bye. Hey, thanks for joining me today on the channel. If you want more videos just like that one, check out some of these other videos that I've already handpicked for you. And don't forget to hit subscribe so that way you're up to date whenever I release a new video. And don't forget, smash that like button, as my kids say. Bye guys.